Yeah. Hare Krishna. So welcome everyone back again. We are continuing to study the Bhagavad Gita, and currently we are at the 5th chapter. And today our discussion will be the last part of chapter 5. So we will begin with this particular verse, which is the verse of Sripad Yamunacharya, where he summarizes the contents of the 5th chapter. This is verse 9 of his writings, which is called as Gita Artha Sangraha. So Sripad Yamunacharya says, Karma Yogasya Saukaryam Shaigryam Kaschana Tadvidaha Brahma Jnana Prakarasya Panchamadhyaya Uchyate. So Panchamadhyaya, the 5th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, he says, has 4 different themes which are being discussed. Karma Yogasya Saukaryam, the simplicity of Karma Yoga. Shaigryam, the speed at which it gives results. Kaschana Tadvidaha, an essential process of Karma Yoga. And that essential process is nothing but, we discussed this in detail, is about seeing how the senses are being engaged and the person is actually doing nothing. That means trying to be like a witness in our own body. So we have discussed this many times. We will revise it once again today. And Brahma Jnana Prakarasya. The Brahma Jnana is nothing but Samatvam, the Samadarshana, which Krishna emphasizes so many times in Bhagavad Gita and also in this chapter. He speaks about it. So these are basically the contents of the 5th chapter. In this way, Sripad Yamunacharya describes the 5th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Right? So now coming to the translation. So if you remember, I'm just going over it where these topics come. So if you see in this particular verse, 3rd verse, Krishna is saying here, Nirdvandohi Mahabaho Sukham Bandhat Pramuchyate. You see this line, Sukham Bandhat. Okay, so this means it is very simple, right? So that means a person, Krishna is saying that the person who does Karma Yoga very easily, he becomes freed from bondage. Which obviously indicates that the other path, which is the Jnana Marga, the Jnana Yoga, that is not so easy. So that it automatically one can understand that Karma Yoga is easy, but Jnana is not easy. So this is one theme that we discussed. Then the second theme that we discussed was this one in verse 6, if you see in chapter 5. Yoga Yukto Munir Brahma Nachirenadi Gachati. Nachirenadi Gachati means very quickly, Krishna says, this Karma Yoga can free you from all misery, which basically indicates Shaigram. Very quickly, it can give results, Achirenadi Gachati, which automatically indicates that the other one, Jnana Yoga, which is there, which is what is being compared here, doesn't free one so easily. Okay, so like this, we are seeing, these 2 topics. And then from these verses onwards, Krishna is speaking about that Kaschana Tadvidaha. Naiva Kinchit Karomiti Yukto Manyeta Tattvavita. This entire series, that how Krishna is asking everyone to be in the mood of an observer. That means we are engaging in seeing, hearing, touching, sleeping, breathing. We are doing so many things in this world. But we should know that the senses are being engaged with a sense object. And actually, I am aloof. So in this series of verses, Krishna is speaking about how Karma Yoga is to be done. So the key point here is that externally you be engaged with your senses in actions according to your nature and svabhava. But at the same time, internally, you look at yourself only as an observer. That means, right? So we can actually try this even 5 minutes a day. If you try this, right, when we are doing some casual work at home, it may be taking bath, it may be doing some routine activity, we can just reflect and see how actually our body is doing so many things, but actually we are a witness only to what the body is doing. And that's what Krishna wants us to come to. Krishna is asking us to practice this yoga with this understanding. That means looking at the body doing things, but we ourselves as observers. And then this concept is elaborated so much here, right? So look at this 11th verse. Krishna is saying, Kayena manasa buddhya kevalair indriyairapi. Kevalair indriyairapi means one should understand that it is only the senses that are getting engaged. It's the senses that need engagement. That is why I'm doing so many things throughout the day. I'm working, I'm earning money, taking care of my family, I'm cooking, I'm eating, I'm sleeping, whatever I'm doing. This is all because the senses need this engagement. That is why I have to do this. Okay. And I'm actually aloof from this. So this is the kind of meditative approach Krishna is asking us to take while doing our routine work in this world. It needs a bit of reflection to think how this is actually very much true. Okay. In fact, a higher level of the same consciousness is that a person thinks I'm not doing anything. It is only my senses that are doing, first thing. And second thing is, it's the Lord who is actually helping me or ensuring that I do these things. Okay, so I heard this interesting point. So there was one devotee, it seems. He's from another sampradaya. He was almost 90-year-old. He was a Kannada devotee, very devoted to Krishna all his life. So it seems in his old age, when he used to walk, when he had to climb stairs, it would be very difficult for him. Because for an old person to climb stairs is always very, very difficult, right? Because, they have to put one step up and slowly hold the railing and climb. So it seems when he would climb stairs, he would keep saying, Hattisu, Hattisu. It means in Kannada, Hattisu means, Mujhe chadao, please take me up. Okay. And when he would come down the stairs, even that would be difficult for him, obviously, because the going up action is also difficult. Coming down action is also difficult. Correct. So when he would come down, he would again find it very difficult. So he would hold the railing tight as he was coming down. And in Kannada, he would keep saying, Ilisu, Ilisu. Ilisu in Kannada apparently means Mujhe utaro. So the mood that he had was that I'm not doing anything. I'm not doing anything. My senses are attempting to climb. It is only you, Lord, who can ensure that I will climb the stairs or I will come down the stairs. Okay. So at one level, you will see that he was endeavoring, correct? He was holding the stairs and he was climbing up, saying Hattisu, Hattisu. And at the same time, he was only endeavoring to come down. It is not that the Lord had lifted him and he was bringing him down or something. He was only endeavoring to come down by holding the stairs, but he was saying Ilisu, Ilisu. That means, oh Lord, you only control all my senses and you only can ensure that this getting down action will happen. So it's a very, it's something amazing if you think about it, that this is a mood of a devotee that even though with my senses I'm doing so many things, the senses are also not belonging to me. They are being controlled by Krishna at a high level of consciousness. So it's only Krishna who can direct these senses and achieve something. So this is a perfect example of Bhagavad Gita, because Krishna is taking all these concepts that he's speaking here to this point only. So just like when we go to the 8th chapter, we will be learning, right? Tasma sarveshu kaleshu ma manusmara yudhicha. Krishna is saying, think of me and fight. Okay. So for this elderly devotee, climbing up and climbing down the stairs itself was a big fight, because it was not easy for him to climb up and climb down because of old age, arthritis or whatever. But at the same time, he was very conscious that I have to struggle to do it. But actually, it is only the Lord who is directing my senses to do it. I really don't even have control over my own senses to ensure that I can climb up the stairs or climb down the stairs. Okay, so these kind of this mood that I'm talking about, it is basically coming from the Gita itself. Maybe Chakrapani Prabhu is there. He can just confirm whether I spoke the right word, whether in Kannada, because I had heard it in some class, whether Hattisu means climbing and Ilisu means climbing down.
Yes, perfectly correct, Prabhuji. Yeah, and I was surprised how you can tell it so exactly. You know Kannada?
No, I don't know. I had heard this in some lecture, so I just memorized the word. Yeah, I didn't know that Hattisu means climb up, so I assumed that the person who told, obviously, he was telling correct only. Okay, thank you for that confirmation. Yeah. Okay, so this is what Bhagavad Gita is leading us to, asking us to say Hattisu, Hattisu while climbing. That means we only do everything with our senses. See, that's what is coming out in this 5th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. This is what, and I really started to appreciate also, this whole chapter title given, especially by Prabhupada, Karma Yoga, Action in Krishna Consciousness. Because this is where it leads to, right? So you are supposed to think that I'm not doing anything. It is my senses that are engaged. And ultimately, my senses are being controlled by Rishikesha, the Supreme Lord Krishna. He's controlling my senses. So that's where it leads to. So even the title of the chapter is very, very appropriate here. Okay, so as Yamunacharya says, this is the Kaschana Tadvida, the process of doing Karma Yoga. So while one is doing Karma Yoga, one is thinking that I am not the doer, my senses are the doers, they need engagement, so it is being done. And at a higher level, it is Krishna who is, doing everything or whatever. So this is very, very beautiful. So, I again, just before I go ahead, I also want to emphasize once again, though we have done this several times before, but I want to re-emphasize this fact that the first 6 chapters, especially in the Ramanujacharya commentary, the entire thing is explained only as Karma Yoga. Entire first 6 chapters. In fact, when you go to the 6th chapter also, you'll be able to appreciate how the 6th chapter, Krishna has built it on top of the first 5 chapters. Okay. And because it is like this, there is always this question being asked, or right, in our circles, we debate this a lot, whether Gita is Jivan Shastra or Moksha Shastra. Okay. This point is raised so many times, right? About Swadharma, which is the first 6 chapters, and ultimately Sarvadharman Parityajya, which is the later part of Gita, which is the Moksha Shastra perspective. Is Gita this or that? The beauty is actually the Gita doesn't make this conflict only. The Gita doesn't create this conflict at all. For the Gita, both these things are very easily reconciled because they both are together. It is part of one thing, right? But it is only in our explanations that sometimes somebody may emphasize on one over the other and unnecessarily create a conflict. But the Gita doesn't create a conflict. So I heard one very interesting anecdote in this point. This is about this, chakras in the body. I'm sure all of you have heard about this concept that our body has 7 chakras, right? There are these 7 chakras. The Mooladhara chakra is the lowest chakra. And there is this, chakra, which is called Krauncha chakra, which is on top. So one of these experts in this chakras, he was basically saying that this Mooladhara chakra, which is there, the lower chakras, they keep you grounded, okay? And they emphasize stability. They talk about the limitations of your body and so on. That is Mooladhara chakra. Whereas this Krauncha chakra, which is there on top, this basically talks of limitlessness. That means Krauncha chakra is talking of limitlessness, how one could just leave this world and get out ultimately. Okay, so if you see these chakras, these 7 chakras, the way these authors describe it, the lower 3 chakras in the body are related to the body itself, talking about the stability of the body, the limitations of the body, being grounded, and so on. Whereas the upper 4 chakras, from the heart, from the Hridaya chakra onwards, they are taking you to limitlessness. They are taking you to moksha. So, I mean, using this as an analogy and, coming back to the theme of Gita, so both are very much needed, right? So both are needed. You need to be grounded, and at the same time, you need to go towards limitlessness. You need to go towards moksha. You need to go towards Sarvadharman Parityajya. Okay. So it is not one against the other, but it is just that both are needed to make it complete. So there was one expert on these chakras. It seems he once made a comment that sometimes for some spiritual people, spiritualists, those who focus too much on that and neglect their lower chakras, it seems their top chakras are open, as in they open up easily, but they have problems in their lower chakras, because of which they may have health issues and so many other issues which they will find, because they have really not understood how to ensure their own bodily stability. So the Gita very amazingly synchronizes both these. The lower, as in going back to the point, it is both Jivan Shastra and Moksha. It doesn't, talk about one in lieu of the other and so on. And that is what we see in the great devotees also. Like even if we take the greatest of devotees who are the gopis of Vrindavan, we see that they did Rasalila, they did the highest thing of surrender. But again, if you see, if you look at it, how many times they left their homes to dance with Krishna? The Bhagavatam talks of it only once, saying that once it happened. And if you see some other literature, you will understand, okay, they did on some other occasions as well. But it is not that was one part of their life, but at the same time, all the other time in their life, they were just doing what they were supposed to do in terms of their worldly activities, right? Taking care of their family, churning butter, milking cows, selling the milk and buttermilk and everything. And while doing all that, they were perfectly situated in Krishna Chaitanya. They were always thinking about Krishna when they were doing this, correct? So this is actually, even if you, so I'm just giving this example to make this point that even if you see the highest devotees that we talk of, they also actually managed to ensure both of them rightly in their life, right? So it was not that they sacrificed one in lieu of the other. So it was never like that, right? So this one point also I wish to make in this context. Now let's move ahead. So so the third theme of this fifth chapter is this particular mood of thinking of looking at oneself as an observer. And as I discussed last time as well, and even today we're making this point that this is indeed a very important part of Karma Yoga, looking at oneself as a neutral person. And because this will actually, this in one way, this comes out of the mode of goodness, and it also increases the mode of goodness in a person. Because when you observe yourself, then you can also see that sometimes we are doing very crazy things, and we can immediately correct ourselves, course correct, and come to the right platform. Because it is not possible that you are doing this particular observing yourself and at the same time doing something very crazy in the world. It cannot happen like that. So if one is abiding by this process, then automatically it ensures that you will be on the right track of dharma always and not fall down or go away from the path. Okay, so this is the third and important theme in this chapter. And the final theme in this chapter, which Yamunacharya talks of, is this particular thing, Brahma Jnana Prakarasya. Brahma Jnana Prakara he introduces in the 18th verse. Vidya Vinay Sampanne Brahmane Gavihastini Sunicheva Sapakecha Pandita Samadarshanaha. Correct? So this is actually what is called as Samatvam. Very interesting. This particular platform, right? Brahma Jnana, Krishna is emphasizing in this chapter and in the next chapter also. You will see when we go to the 6th chapter, Krishna keeps talking about this Samatvam, looking at everyone with equal vision. Okay, Krishna is going to emphasize this so much because apparently this is considered to be like the culmination of Karma Yoga. And only it is said that if one comes to this platform of Samatvam, equal vision, then one can sit down and do one's meditation nicely. And we will elaborate this when we come to 6th chapter. So that is actually the connection between 5th chapter and 6th chapter, this level of Samatvam. Without this, as we will see in the 6th chapter, one cannot progress on the path of Dhyani Yoga and so on, right? So, and even as a devotee also, if we are too much thinking, if we are too much having differentiated vision in terms of looking at people like that, then it actually becomes very difficult to focus. So this is one important theme that will come from now. So let's go into this discussion. So we had already defined this. So Krishna is talking about it in 2 verses, 18 and 19. In 18, he's saying that the sage by virtue of true knowledge looks at a dog eater, elephant, a cow, and Brahmana, learned Brahmana, all of them equally. And then he basically says that in the 19th verse, those whose minds are established in sameness again means Samatvam, and equanimity have already conquered the conditions of birth and death. So Krishna is saying that Nirdosham hi samam brahma, tasmat brahmani me stitaha. So Krishna is again glorifying this particular position. Now the question is how to achieve it. How do we become Samadarshi? So that is the final subject of the 5th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, which is what we will see today. Okay, so from the 20th verse onwards, Sripad Ramanujacharya explains that Krishna is speaking about how to become Samadarshi. How does one actually achieve this Samadarshi? So let's look at the verses one by one. So in 5.20, Krishna is saying, Na prahrishyet priyam prapya, no dvijet prapya chapriyam, stira buddhira sammudo brahmavid brahmani stitaha. Okay, so I'm reading the translation of Srila Prabhupada. The person who neither rejoices upon achieving something pleasant, nor laments upon achieving something unpleasant, who is self-intelligent, who is unbewildered, who knows the signs of God, is already situated in transcendence. Okay, so let's look more at the verse. So Ramanujacharya here in his commentary, he says that the first step to become Samadarshi is to be sober in happiness and not be depressed in distress. So he says that this is step number 1 to be Samadarshi. Okay, so as I already said, Samadarshi is a prerequisite to do dhyana, to do meditation, and so on. Now the question really is, how do you achieve Samadarshi? So for that, the first step is to be sober in pleasure, in happiness, and also in distress. Now, when we say sober, does it mean that we should not become happy at all? So Ramanujacharya says, no, it is not like that. Krishna is not unreasonable. That is why he says Krishna uses the word na prahrishyet. So in Sanskrit, what happens is, if you look at the Sanskrit word, na, hrishyeta means to become happy. We all know, right? Hrishya means to become happy. Prahrishyet means to become too happy. Okay, so Ramanujacharya says it is obvious that if something nice happens, you will feel happiness, but don't become too happy, as in don't get too carried away by that. Okay, and similarly, he says for the misery also. Okay, when there is distress, it is obvious that you will feel a little bit affected. Everybody is going to get affected. It is, I mean, nobody can say that distress will come and he will not get affected at all. But he says the understanding that pra is to be applied to the misery also. So the pra means too much. Don't become too affected. So Ramanujacharya reminds us of one verse that is already spoken by Krishna in the 2nd chapter of Bhagavad Gita, 2.57, where Krishna had said, Nabi nandati nadveshti. If you remember that verse, 2.57 of Bhagavad Gita, Nabi nandati. Nandati means to become happy. Na abhinandati means don't become too happy. Okay, so what Krishna is saying is, you will feel happiness when something nice happens, but don't go overboard with your pleasure, with your happiness. And similarly, it is understood that if there is some problem, then you will have lamentation, but don't go overboard in lamentation. So this is a very, very practical teaching of Gita. And obviously, we have so many scope for us to implement in our life. And Ramanujacharya gives the example of Lord Ramachandra, saying how Ramachandra, he is giving us this ideal example of how to be. So he says that when Rama was told that he is going to be coronated as a king, he didn't become overjoyed by that news. He knew that he is going to be the king next day. He didn't become overjoyed. And why he didn't become overjoyed? In order to teach us a lesson, we should not become too jolly when we hear such news, because tomorrow something else can happen. And exactly that's what happened. The next day, Kaikeyi ensured that Ram will not become the king. And that time also it is said, Valmiki very beautifully describes that Lord Ramachandra's face when he heard this news from Kaikeyi and Dasharath, that he has to go to the forest for 14 years and so on, his face was avikari. It did not change too much. As in, so Rama is teaching us, Lord Rama is teaching us by his own example that the world is such that these things keep changing. So why it is like that? Because happiness and distress in this world, Priya and Apriya, keep coming and going very quickly. And also Priya and Apriya are very relative in this world. They're very, very relative. So for this also Ramanujacharya, he quotes one story from the Ramayana. He says that in the Ramayana, during Ayodhya Kanda, when Ram and Sita were supposed to go to the forest, at that time Sita, Ram doesn't want to take Sita to the forest with him. So Sita at that time tells Rama that no, you should take me. And there is a lot of argument that happens between both of them. And then Ram is not willing to take. So Sita says, okay, I will ask you one question. Okay, if you answer it correctly, then I will not come to the forest. You will. But if you give wrong answer, then I will come. So Ram says, okay. So Sita is asking Ram, what is Swarga and what is Naraka? He's asking Ram, you please define it. So Ram defines, saying that Swarga is such and such place, Indra, this, that, and Naraka is a place where, there is suffering and so on and so forth. Hellish planets where one goes due to sins. And so Sita starts to laugh, saying, see, you lost. You are giving a wrong answer. Actually, the Swarga, Naraka, it is different for everyone. Okay, it depends on one's perception. Basically, Sita wants to say that without you, Ayodhya also will be Naraka for me. So Sita basically says that Swarga, Naraka, all this is different for everyone. Yeah, I mean, practical, right? Like for a musician. If for a musician, his throat is good, then it is Swarga because he can sing very nicely. Else it is Naraka. For a poor man, if he gets food in a day, that is Swarga. If he doesn't get, that is Naraka. So basically, for different people, Sita says that depending on their situation, it is Swarga and Naraka. So how can you talk about it like that? So similarly, in this verse, Krishna is using the word Priya and Apriya. Priya and Apriya means Priya and Apriya for the individual. That means Krishna is talking about relative Priya and Apriya. That means Krishna is talking about the individual. That means me, you, each of us, we have our own Priya and Apriya in our life. Okay. And what is Priya to me, if I get that, I should not become too happy, Krishna says. And similarly, the other way around, right? So this is the first important lesson, which we have to actually practice in our life. We have to bring it in our life, in our daily life, in order to become Samadarshi. Okay, so this is all Ramanujacharya is saying, that these verses have to be implemented by Karma Yogi to become Samadarshi. And Samadarshi is needed so that you can do meditation. And then only everything else comes. Okay, so that is why this thing is very important. And then the final part of this verse, the second part of this verse is 4 things Krishna is saying. Brahma-vid, understand the Atma by hearing from the great sages. Brahma-sthitaha, that means not only understand the Atma, but also think about it. One thing is, in these chapters of Bhagavad Gita, we also understand that contemplation of these subjects are very important. I mean, it's strongly recommended to everybody to, whenever we get time, to kind of read these verses repeatedly, these Sanskrit verses, kind of memorize them along with their meaning. And even during our daily course of action, just to remember what is being said in the Gita. Okay, because that is considered very important. Brahma Sthitaha means one has to meditate on these meanings and be fixed in the understanding of the Atma. When that happens, Astamudaha, that means you will not fall in illusion, and Sthira Buddhi. Sthira Buddhi means you become fixed in this understanding that I am not changing, only my body is changing. And because of which, with this body, Priya, Apriya keep coming and going, so I shouldn't get affected. And without doing this, one cannot become Samadarshi. That is the first step. Okay. Then let's see the second step. Okay, so this is the first step Krishna is saying here, text number 20. Then text 21. Bahya sparsheshva saktatma vindantyatmani sukam sab brahma yoga yuktatma sukam akshayam ashnute. Okay, Krishna is saying that such a liberated person is not attracted to material sense pleasure, but is always in trance, enjoying the pleasure within. In this way, the self-realized person enjoys unlimited happiness, for he concentrates on the Supreme. Okay, so this is the second step which Krishna is talking about, how to become Samadarshi. The first step, as we know, is to be equal in Priya Apriya. That means to not go overboard in Priya and Apriya situation. Now he is saying about external things. So he's saying Bahya Sparsham, whatever is outside, Asaktatma, be detached from it. And how you can be detached? Experience happiness in Atma. Okay, see, one thing Gita always talks of is some kind of, especially, because now we are going into the Dhyani Yoga part, you will be seeing repeatedly Krishna talking about meditating on the nature of the Atma. Okay, Krishna does talk about it in 5th and 6th chapter, which a Karma Yogi is supposed to do. That means whenever, one is sitting down for some meditation, one thinks about the nature of the Atma. And it is said that just by thinking about the nature of the Atma, just by focusing on yourself, the Atma within, and meditating deeply on how I am different from the body, one experiences happiness. Even this theoretical knowledge in the beginning, it gives happiness, Krishna says. And it is seen as well. It is, if you practice this, thinking about it, you will see that just understanding that I am not this body is the beginning of all happiness. Okay. Another important thing we need to know is in this section of the Gita, Krishna is speaking quite strongly about getting detached from material happiness. Okay. At the same time, this doesn't mean that Krishna has at any point of time negated action in the world. I mean, I'm making this point because sometimes our preachers or sometimes in our explanation of Bhagavad Gita, we confuse the two. Krishna is recommending lot of action externally with one's senses according to one's nature. At the same time, internally being detached from enjoyment per se and focusing on the Atma, later Paramatma, Bhagavan, and so on. So Krishna is speaking about both these things simultaneously. Okay. Someone can miss out this point in the Gita and think or imagine that Krishna is talking about giving up action also, but Krishna is never doing that. Okay. And then Krishna is saying, Sab Brahma Yoga Yuktatma. That means Brahma Yoga Yuktatma means contemplating on the nature of Atma. Sukham Akshayam Ashnute. It gives happiness which is eternal. Okay. So Krishna is saying that just even by meditating on this, on the nature of Atma, you will start experiencing permanent happiness. Okay. So Krishna is asking us to do this. So this is also an important step to become Samadarshi. Right. This is the second thing. Now the question is how to do it, right? How can we think that I am not, how can we become attached to external sensory pleasure? And here comes the most famous verse, one of the most famous verses, often quoted verses of the Gita. Yehi samsparshaja bhoga dukkha yone evate adyantavanta kaunteya nateshu namate buddha. Where Krishna is saying an intelligent person does not take part in the sources of misery, which are due to the contact with material senses, O son of Kunti. Such pleasures have a beginning and an end. So a wise man does not delight in them. Okay. So the point being raised here is how to give up attachment to material enjoyment, because we have cultivated it for lifetime. So Ramanacharya, he gives a nice example in his commentary. He says that just like if you know that your best friend, you have a best friend with whom you have spent lot of years together and everything, but suddenly you came to know that he is a big murderer and he has looted many people and killed a dozen people, then immediately you will give up his friendship, right? So he raises this question. That suppose you have a close friend with whom you have been for many years, and suddenly you hear and it is authenticated that he has committed a dozen murders and he has done a lot of theft and loot and so on. Immediately you will give up his friendship. You will not think that, oh, he was my friend for so long, how can I give up? So he says similarly with this sense enjoyment. So he says this is also like this. This is to be given up immediately. Yehi samsparshaja bhoga. Okay, so he points out several faults in these samsparshaja, these external objects. So Ramanacharya says first is arjana dosham. Arjana dosham means to get object itself, it is very painful. To get an object to enjoy. Rakshita dosham. When you try to protect the object for enjoyment, that also is painful. Kshaya dosham. When the object which you want for enjoyment gets destroyed, then also it is painful. Bhoga dosham. When you are enjoying that object, that time also it is painful, he says. Okay, so for that he quotes this verse from the Bhagavatam. Najatu kama kamana upabhogena sanyami havishma Krishna vartmena bhuya abhivartate. That means it is like offering butter, right? Even as you enjoy, the feeling is that, array, this is nothing, I want much more. And finally, himsa dosham, that most of the times enjoyment is produced by giving pain to somebody else. So he points out several faults of any object of this world which a person may try to enjoy, and that is a adi antavant. It has a beginning and end, and one shouldn't take relish in this. So it is very interesting that these. So just like I was doing an astrology class with my teacher. So my teacher was telling that in astrology, when they see the chart of a prospective boy and a girl for their marriage, One of the criteria for matching is called as yoni compatibility. That means sexual compatibility. Okay. And another aspect is whether children will be there in the marriage or no. Okay. So these are two different things. So in some marriage, children will be there, but sexual compatibility may not be there so much. So that basically means that they may not be able to enjoy too much of sex or be like that, but children will be there. So he was saying that in traditional times, people gave importance to that children part of it in astrology. That if children are going to be there in the marriage, you could go ahead, people would say. But he said that in today's time, sometimes we need to see this also, because people are entering a marriage for enjoyment. And if the enjoyment is not there and there is no compatibility in that, sometimes there is a problem. But he was saying traditionally, one gave more importance to the children aspect of marriage than the enjoyment part of it, because this was just considered as dharma to be done, right? So one had to do it, so that one can have children like that. Okay, so anyway, so I'm just making this point here. So these are all considered points by Sripad Ramanujacharya one has to follow to come to Samadarshi. I'm reminding you of that. That means being equipoised, understanding pleasure is from the Atma, understanding that external things are not going to give me satisfaction and so on. So he's saying only when you do all this, you're going to come to Samadarshi. Until then, you cannot. The next verse also in the same direction only. Verse number 23. Shaknoti haiva yastodam prak sharira vimokshanat kama krododbhavam vegam sayuktastu sukhi naraha. Krishna is saying, before giving up this present body, if one is able to tolerate the urges of the material senses and check the forces of desire and anger, he is well situated and happy in this world. So Krishna has given a task to everyone that before death, one should sodom. Sodom, this word basically means to tolerate, actually. In Prabhupada's translation also, Prabhupada translates sodom as tolerate. So Ramanujacharya says, what is this sodom? Why is Krishna saying tolerate? Tolerate is too passive, he says. Actually, it has to just be given up completely. So he says that Krishna is trying to be very accommodative to everybody by saying tolerate kama and krodha. But he says, I would say that one has to strictly give it up. Okay. So then he elaborates that kama and krodha bring vega. So here the word vega is also there, right? Kama krododbhavam vegam. Vega means a push. Kama and krodha give a push. And it gives push in three places, he says. It gives push in the mind, in words, and in deeds. Okay, so in the mind, there is a push. In words, there is a push. And in the deeds also, there is a push. So we know these things, right? So in words, for example, sometimes people engage in lewd speech, which is basically due to kama, krodha, etc. So one has to give it up. Prak sharira vimokshana. It must be given up before death. And only such a person can become happy. And only such a happy person can actually see everybody samatvam. Okay, so we have to remember this. All this is connected to that samatvam, to achieve that equanimity. Vidya vinay sampanne, to achieve that state. Krishna is talking about all this. So one has to consciously practice these things. Then the 24th verse. Yonta sukontar arama satantar jyotireva yaha sayogi brahma nirvanam brahma bhutodi gacchati. Verse number 24, Krishna is saying, one whose happiness is within, who is active and rejoices within, and whose aim is inward, is actually a perfect mystic. He is liberated in the Supreme, and ultimately he achieves the Supreme. Okay, so here Krishna is talking about Karma Yogi having the goal of Anta Sukha, Anta Arama, and Antar Jyoti. Three things are being spoken. So the opposite of these three are Bhogyam, Bhoga Upakaranam, Bhoga Sthanam. Bhogyam means enjoyment in the world. Bhoga Upakaranam means the objects to enjoy or the ways to enjoy. Bhoga Sthanam means the place of enjoyment, which is the material world or matter. And Krishna is saying the Karma Yogi has to give up these three and focus on Anta Sukha, internal happiness from the Atma. Antar Aramaha, that means the Atma only becomes the Bhogasthana. And Anta Jyoti means you don't need any other Karanam. You don't need any Upakaranam to really be happy. The Atma itself is capable of giving you pleasure. Okay, the Atma itself is capable of giving you pleasure. These things are going to be elaborated in the 6th chapter, remember, because Now you are repeatedly going to see such statements where Krishna is asking us to meditate on the Atma itself. And this is actually the goal of Hatha Yoga, the Dhyani Yoga thing, where you do all this asana pranayam and sit and, meditate within, close your eyes and just focus on the Atma and do that type of a meditation, which is going to give a person a lot of happiness and pleasure from within. Okay, so this is what Krishna is asking us to do. Okay. Then again, 25th verse. So this is all again related to the same thing, right? Labante Brahma Nirvana Vrishaya Kshina Kalmashaha Chinna Dvaita Yatatmana Sarva Bhuta Hite Rataha. Okay, so the 25th verse, Krishna is saying, those who are beyond the dualities that arise from doubts, whose minds are engaged within, who are always busy working for the welfare of all beings and who are free from all sins, achieve liberation in the Supreme. Okay, so here Ramanujacharya focuses on two things. One is Sarva Bhuta Hite Rataha. He says we have to become Sarva Bhuta Hite Rataha to achieve Samadarshana. Again, Samadarshana is coming because all this is for that. So for this, Ramanujacharya quotes a verse from Vishnu Puran. The beautiful verse from Vishnu Puran. It says, Shruyatam Dharma Sarvaswam Shrutva Chaiva Avadharyata Atmana Pratikulani Paresham Na Samachare. Actually, the second part of this verse is important. Atmana Pratikulani. Atmana Pratikulani means जो आपको अच्छा नहीं लगता, what you don't like. Paresham na samachare. Don't do it for others. So this is considered a definition of dharma given in Vishnu Puran. The Vishnu Puran says Shruyatam Dharma Sarvaswam. What is dharma for everyone? So it says dharma for everyone is Atmana Pratikulani. What you don't like, Paresham na samachare. Don't do it for others. So this is the beginning of Sarva Bhuta Hite Rataha. Such people are actually rishis because they really care for everyone. And so rishi means something like this, Sarva Bhuta Hite Rataha, who is a well-wisher of all living beings, right? But that is why we also see that for a grihastha, especially this charity, this giving food, right, to people, giving charity is so much emphasized because these things are said to help us come to the level of Sarva Bhuta Hite Rataha. And if you see, actually, Grihastha Dharma involves giving charity to anyone and everyone. It's not just limited to just some set of people. One is supposed to do it in order to come to this level of Sarva Bhuta Hite Rataha. So this level is, this state of achievement is emphasized a lot. And another thing in this verse is Chinna Dvaita Yatatmanaha, being free from duality. We have discussed this many times before. Being free from duality doesn't mean that duality is not going to be there at all. What it basically means is you manage it in such a way that it affects you minimum. So just like we give the example of Arjuna itself. Arjuna was in a duality because he thought, I will not fight the war because if I fight the war, I have to kill Bhishma and Drona. But what does Krishna say in the second chapter, 35th verse? Krishna says that if you run away from the battlefield, you will think that you will not kill Bhishma and Drona by running away from battlefield, but people will call you a coward and that will cause you more pain and that will cause you death. Right? Krishna says, Maranadatirichyate. It will cause you pain equal to or more than death. So what you understand from that is the nature of the world is such that any situation will give you some pain. Okay, you have to see the minimum thing. Okay, so Arjuna was thinking that fighting the war will give me more pain because I have to kill Bhishma and Drona. Krishna is saying, no, if you run away from the battlefield, that will actually give you more pain because you are not a Brahmana. And because you are not a Brahmana, when people tease you that, hey, you darpuk, bhagya, wahan se. If people start teasing you like that, then that will be worse than death for you. So that means the idea is duality means everything has a flip side. Every occupation has a flip side. The Brahmana's occupation has a flip side. Kshatriya occupation has a flip side. But if you are engaged in your own Varna Dharma, then the flip side is minimum. So Krishna wants to tell that killing Bhishma and Drona will be painful for you only, but there is no escape from it. Because this pain is going to be less than the other pain of leaving the battlefield. That pain is going to be more than this pain. Okay, so this is how you actually conquer duality. by sticking to one's duty and also tolerating, okay, which Krishna has already said in 2.14. Tam Sutikshasva Bharat. Okay, so it doesn't mean duality goes away, but like this, you have to manage duality. And this is again a very important lesson from this verse. Chinna Dvaita Yatatmana. It's almost like if you see in Gita, at least 4 5 times, Krishna talks about going beyond duality. And this is a repeated theme in the Gita, right? And yeah, 1 second. My wife. Yeah. Now coming to verse number 26. We are towards the end now. Kama Krodha Vimuktanam Yatinam Yatta Chetasam Avito Brahma Nirvanam Vartate Viditatmanam. So Ramanujacharya says this verse, in verse 26, Krishna is summarizing everything that he spoke from verse number 20 to 25. जो भी 20 से 25 तक कृष्ण ने बताया सब कुछ समराइज कर रहे हैं यहाँ पर, and you'll see that Krishna is saying those who are free from anger and material desire, those who are self-realized, self-disciplined, constantly endeavoring for perfection, are assured of liberation in the Supreme in the very near future. So Ramanujacharya says all these things Krishna has spoken in the last 6 verses. He's summarizing in verse 26. Kama Krodha he has mentioned in 2023. Yati he spoke about in 2021. Yati means Sthira Buddhi. Yata Chetasa, fixed in mind, he spoke about in verse 24. Vijitatmanaha he spoke about in verse 22. So this 26th verse is a summary verse of a section summary. Krishna is summarizing whatever he spoke in the last 5 verses, saying that this is how you achieve Samadarshana. Okay, so just to recap, Samadarshana is achieved by first of all being equipoised in pleasure and pain, not going overboard in happiness, not going overboard in misery, external objects, not getting too carried away by external objects and enjoyment, focusing on the Atma. Understanding the problems in material objects which are for the purpose of enjoyment, and then ensuring that one conquers lust and anger in this life itself before death, and focusing on Antar Jyoti, the pleasure of the Atma itself, and tolerating the duality, as we said, and working for the welfare of all beings. So these are all steps given by Krishna to achieve Samadarshana. If you practice all this, you can come to Samadarshana. And once you do that, once you have practiced Karma Yoga properly and achieved Samadarshana, then what can you do? Verse 27 and 28. So 27 and 28, actually, Krishna is now introducing Dhyani Yoga, which is from the 6th chapter. But Krishna is giving a summary of the 6th chapter here itself, right? Sparshan Kritva Bahirbahyam Chakshushaivantara Bruoho Pranapano Samo Kritva Nasa Bhyantara Charino Yatendriya Manobuddhir Munir Moksha Parayanaha Vigatecha Bayakrodo Ya Sada Mukta Evasaha. So reading the translation, shutting out all external objects, keeping the eyes and vision concentrated within the 2 eyebrows, suspending the inward and outward breath with the nostrils, and thus controlling the mind, senses, intelligence. The transcendentalist aiming at liberation becomes free from desire, fear, and anger. One who is always in this state is liberated. So this is nothing but the Dhyana Yoga of 6th chapter Krishna has summarized. Now another interesting thing Ramanujacharya says that the Dhyana Yoga of 6th chapter is to be practiced by the Karma Yogi in his daily life. So Ramanujacharya says the 6th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, which is there now, which we are going to right now, he says this is not something which is going to be practiced by someone sitting in the forest. He's saying no, Krishna has not presented it like that. He says Krishna has presented the 6th chapter for somebody who is a Karma Yogi in this world, who has to take out some time, let us say half an hour a day, and do this type of meditation at home. And when he does this Dhyana Yoga along with his Karma Yoga, then he achieves liberation. So basically, Ramanujacharya at this point, he makes a very interesting distinction by saying that when we said Karma Yoga gives perfection, what is the perfection Karma Yoga gives? This Karma Yoga brings you to this point of 5.18. It brings you to the point of Samadarshana. If you practice Karma Yoga, whatever Krishna has said in chapter 3, 4, 5. After coming to Samadarshana, that itself is considered a very exalted state. At that state, one will have to practice Dhyana Yoga daily for some amount of time. Okay, so he says that when you practice those principles of Dhyana Yoga, then the door of Mukti actually opens. That means you actually, go beyond the world or whatever at the end of giving up the body. And then Bhakti Yoga comes, right? So that will of course come from the 7th chapter. Okay, so this is a very important point here. Now the last verse, a very beautiful verse, and again the commentary of Ramanacharya is brilliant here. We'll just speak a little bit about that and end the chapter. Bhoktaram yajnatapasam sarvaloka maheshwaram suhridam sarva bhutanam nyatva mam shantim richati. A person in full consciousness of me, knowing me to be the ultimate beneficiary of all sacrifices and austerities, the supreme lord of all planets and devatas, and the benefactor and well-wisher of all living entities, attains peace from the pangs of material misery. Ramanacharya is asking a question here at 5.29. How come Krishna suddenly brought himself into the picture? Because if you see carefully now, in these chapters of Karma Yoga, Krishna has not got himself into the equation too much. Krishna is just speaking about Karma Yoga, he's speaking about Akarma, he's speaking about difference between Karma Yoga and Jnana Yoga. But suddenly here Krishna has got himself into the equation, saying Bhoktara Surdam Jnatva Mam. Krishna is talking about himself. So he says, why did he get himself into the picture? So he says, this is another answer to 5.1. So 5.1, if you remember, the first question in this chapter, the first verse in this chapter was what? Arjuna is asking, Sanyasam Karmanam Krishna Punar Yogam Te Shamsati, Yachreya Etyor Ekam Tanme Bruhi Sinishchitam. That means among these two things, Sanyasam Karma, that means giving up Karma Yoga and doing Jnana Yoga, and Karma Yoga. Among Karma Yoga and Jnana Yoga, which one is better? Arjuna had asked, right? Which one is better? See, this is the question that Arjuna has asked in the opening of this chapter. Krishna spoke 28 verses in connection with that, right? Krishna first of all spoke how Karma Yoga is simple. He spoke about how Karma Yoga easily gives fruit. Then how to practice Karma Yoga by looking at oneself as an observer. Then what is the perfection of Karma Yoga coming to Samatvam? How to achieve Samatvam? All that Krishna has spoken. Now Krishna is saying another way, another answer to 5.1. What is the other answer? The other answer to 5.1 is how Karma Yoga is easy. So Krishna wants to say practice Karma Yoga, right? So how Karma Yoga can be made easy? So Karma Yoga can be made easy by making Krishna the goal of Karma Yoga. That is what Krishna is answering in this verse, right? Sarvadeva Nama. So Bhoktara Mekya Tapasa means to understand that everything is to be done for Krishna. Okay, Sarvaloka Mahesh. So Bhoktara, so everything is to be done for Krishna means all my Karma Yoga is also to be done for Krishna only. Okay, so Krishna is giving another answer to 5.1. Arjuna had asked, right, among Karma Yoga and Jnana Yoga, which is better? So Krishna had said so many things, but now he is again answering that first question only by saying that, hey, look, Arjuna, if you do everything for me, it will become very easy for you. Okay, just do Karma Yoga for me, understanding I am the enjoyer of everything. Krishna is saying, right? And Suhridam Sarva Bhutanam. Suhridam Sarva Bhutanam means Krishna wants to say that, look, like how Vibhishan, he did his thing, right? He completely surrendered himself to Lord Ramachandra. And Suhridam Sarva Bhutanam, understanding that I am the well-wisher of everybody in this world. So Krishna says, if somebody practices Karma Yoga by just keeping these three things in mind, that everything is done for Krishna, Krishna is the master of all the world, and Krishna is the well-wishing friend of everyone. Because even we want to become well-wisher of everyone, right? Because Krishna has said earlier, if you remember, Sarva Bhuta Hite Rataha, that the Karma Yogi is supposed to become the well-wisher of everyone. So first, so all this becomes easy by understanding that Krishna is actually the well-wisher of everyone, and I am supposed to be a servant of his. I am supposed to follow in his footsteps and also act in the same way to everyone. Okay, so he says, so Ramanacharya is saying that this is an answer to 5.1, and if somebody does Karma Yoga for Krishna, then one gets Shanti. So then Ramanacharya is asking this question, what is the Shanti Krishna is speaking here? Is this the Shanti of liberation? He says, no, it is not the Shanti of liberation, because the Karma Yogi is not yet technically liberated. As if the Karma Yogi is maximum he comes to is Samatva. He has to practice Dhyani Yoga or he has to practice Bhakti Yoga. Only then he's going to get liberated. As if. So what is this Shanti? So he says that while doing Karma Yoga, one needs a peaceful mind. Shanti chahiye na duniya mein logon ko kaam karte samay. That means one has a family, one has an occupation. All these things sometimes give some kind of pain or uncomfort to a person. Person feels like Arjuna, he has to fight with Bhishma Drona. So all these things give some kind of, the nature of the world is such that some prickle, some thorns will be there, which will be troubling us. So hence our mind may be a little disturbed. So Krishna is saying, if you think that you are doing all this karma yoga as an offering to me, then you will become peaceful. That means just by understanding, if you can connect that karma yoga to Krishna, then you will achieve a peace so that you can do your karma yoga nicely. Okay, so that is how Ramanujacharya explains this verse. Very interesting explanation. He is explaining this verse in the context of 5.1 itself. Okay, and thus this chapter ends. So summarizing the chapter, the first verse of this chapter was Arjuna's question, which is better, karma yoga or jnana yoga? Verse number 2 to 7, Krishna unequally says that karma yoga is only better than jnana yoga. It is simple also, it gives results quickly also. Then verse number 8 to 12, Krishna is saying, I am not the doer, the senses are the doer. That is what Krishna explains. And then from 14 to 15, Krishna is saying, Atma is only a witness. He is not doing anything. 16 to 19, Krishna says, what is the highest level of karma yogi? He comes to Samadarshana. Verse 20 to 26, Krishna is talking about the qualities that the karma yogi has to consciously develop to reach Samadarshi. And then 27 and 28 is giving an introduction to Ashtanga Yoga. And finally, in verse 29, he is giving another way of answering 5.1. Okay, so with that, we end this particular chapter. We'll just take some questions, if any. So just to remind everyone, so I started by talking also about how, even when we are doing ordinary, our daily routine, how one focuses that Hattisu Ilisu. You can remember that in Kannada. That means, I'm not doing anything. It is my senses which is being directed by the Lord, which is doing everything in this world. So in this mood, one basically practices. And I hope you also recall this whole discussion of chakra that we had in Mooladhara chakra and Krauncha chakra, right? So all the chakras are needed. So we are not running into any conflict. Yes, Hare Krishna. Yes, Damodarasham, please go ahead.
Hare Krishna. Two questions. The first one is, you mentioned that one must be sober in happiness. You explained that it should not be too much happiness.
Yeah.
But mostly what happens is happiness is also connected with the efforts which we put. If we have put a lot of efforts, then we get success. So then, my question is, in general, it's difficult to be sober in the happiness. So what things we can do so that we can be not overjoyed, but be sober in the happiness?
Yeah, so one lesson that we learn why we should be sober in happiness and not go overboard is that if we are, to the extent we jump up and down when we are happy, to that extent we will be miserable when there is sorrow. Okay, so basically both these things come together. Okay, so it's not possible that I will only be too happy when something nice happens, and when misery happens, I will be composed. So it's not like that. To the extent people jump up and down when they are jolly, to that extent they suffer also when there are problems. So that's why, going back to Lord Rama's example, why Rama did not jump too much up and down when he came to know that he is going to become the king the next day, understanding that the world is such that anything can happen anytime. So we are just focused on trying to do the best in our given situation. Okay, so Krishna actually emphasizes on this a lot in Bhagavad Gita, time and again. Second chapter, third chapter, even the 12th chapter, Krishna keeps saying this, that, sama, sukha, dukkha, samay, kritva, labha, labha, jaya, jaya. This principle which Krishna introduces in the second chapter, he keeps saying again and again. So I think consciously we will have to cultivate this in our daily small successes and failures, where we are not going overboard in either case, right? Because all these things are for the body and they all keep coming and going. That is Krishna's essential teaching. They all keep coming and going like summer and winter. So there is no point in jumping too much in summer thinking that this is fun, because very soon winter is going to come and it's going to be very cold. So that's how, so the Gita teaches us to focus on being beautiful and doing the best, and not getting carried away by any situation. And consciously one is supposed to do that. Otherwise, then you cannot even practice whatever Krishna is going to talk from the 6th chapter onwards. Dhyani Yoga. One cannot practice Dhyani Yoga at all. Because without practicing this, one cannot achieve samatvam. Without achieving samatvam, one cannot do dhyana, one cannot do meditation. Consequently, one cannot get uplifted. That is an answer.
Yes, sir. And the another one is that bhoga thing which you said, it is difficult to achieve, difficult to protect, difficult while enjoying, and then when it gets destroyed. So, like hearing such things makes one eventually to not strive for anything.
Yeah, very good point. Yeah, this is sometimes what happens. This is what they call as throwing the baby along with the bath water. So Krishna has only in the Gita asked us to give up that attitude of enjoying. Not Krishna has asked us to stop the work. See, these are two different things. And sometimes we think that, if I'm not supposed to enjoy, then why should I, even endeavor for it? So just like marriage, many times we always project marriage as an act of enjoyment, right? I mean, we say that a person who wants to enjoy, he gets married and so on. But if you see the Shastra portrays marriage as an act of dharma. For the sake of dharma, one gets married. Okay, because it is dharma, one has to get married. It's not about enjoyment or suffering. So just like if you remember, I told you there was one devotee who, in his astrology chart, there was no enjoyment only in family life. So he was, but he was not so-called sannyas material or anything. He was just a normal guy. So he was like little upset, or he was sad to hear that he doesn't have so much enjoyment in his karma. Okay, so what is the use of getting married? He thought, because anyway, I'm not going to enjoy so much. But that's not the point. You don't get married for enjoyment, and it's not that you avoid that marriage itself just because enjoyment is not going to be there. Right? It is done as a dharma because it has to be done. It is done. That's why if you see the Pandavas, even at the end of the Mahabharata war, they're very sober. If you see Lord Rama after killing Ravan, he's very, very sober. He's not jumping up and down like a cricket match, the hero who won the match, saying that, I killed Ravan, yay, nothing like that. He's just very, very sober at the end of the thing. Even the Pandavas are like that. Even though they win the kingdom back, they're very sober. There is a soberity in their personality. And this is where the Gita is bringing us to, where there is a lot of action in the world. Because of dharma, you have to do this. Okay, you have to engage in the world, you have to have children, you have to get money, you have to do all these things. But at the same time, that focus is not a personal enjoyment. So that is hammered a lot. Yeah, and it's an amazing combination. See, because when you do the external action, then your indriyas which are there, that's what we learned in the 5th chapter. All the senses, they have the need to be engaged. They are getting engaged also. But at the same time, you, the person, are consciously cultivating these values in life, because of which you're not getting affected by anything. And that's how you come to that Padma Patra Ivambasa, Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita. So both are important, external action and that internal mood. So that is where Krishna is bringing Karma Yoga too, right?
Thank you very much.
Yeah, Haribol. Any other comment here? Anybody else with anything? No. Is there any other question or comment?
Haribol bro, can you hear me?
Yeah, very much.
So you talked about astrology and all, so what if if a devotee finds out that in his married life there is I mean, not enjoyment, but it's going to be very bad marriage, then what he should decide?
Okay, see, first of all, I want to say one thing here, that when you say good, bad like that, we generally imagine that we imagine in terms of a lot of suffering coming, and a lot of pain coming from the spouse, etc. Generally, if you see astrology, it doesn't paint only a gloomy picture of anything. At least I'm a new student only. Or Prahlad Prabhu is much more senior. I'm not sure if he's there here, but astrology never shows a gloomy picture of something, saying that pura gaya iska satya nash hai. My teacher was telling me that is very rarely there is some chart like this, where you will see that there is no hope only for the person. For most people, either it will be like, okay, there is a lot of positive things, or there will be some challenges. Okay. But if they face that challenge with whatever the right mood and all that, and obviously if they practice karma yoga the way Krishna is saying in Bhagavad Gita, then they actually achieve the goal of life and marriage and everything. Correct. So this entire gloomy picture is never presented so much. Maximum it will say is the fourth house is, for example, the house of pleasure, happiness, etc. Shukra, the Shukra, where the Shukra is, the Venus is sitting or whatever, that would also indicate also. Anyway, I'm not going into the technical details of astrology, but the thing is, so it may be there that happiness is not there much, but responsibility is there. Na? See, even if somebody doesn't have happiness in his life so much, but there is a need of responsibility to go through these situations, right? To go through marriage, go through having children, engage in all that. Okay, you may not have fun in the process, but that was anyway not so much, at least from the Gita perspective. Again, astrology and Gita would be slightly different, as in because astrology would just say that, okay, there is pleasure, this, that, but the Gita is very clear, right? We look at action in the world more from a responsibility perspective rather than enjoyment perspective. So then that's okay. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you.
Prahlad Prabhu, you're there. If you're there, you want to add something about this? Okay, I don't know if it's there. Any other final comment or anything? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Prabhuji, I want to add there one point that in astrology it is also said that as per Desh Kala Patra, you give the predictions. Like as Prabhuji told, if someone's chart is not good, okay, the marriage house is in some kind of affliction. So this same chart, if I had to predict with this sort of 5 decades ago, I will say that yeah, there will be slight amount of tension in the marriage, okay. But if I have to predict in the sort of present time, I will say that yeah, there can be a divorce also. So it all depends upon the place, the time, and attitude of the people as per the time also. And even if in somebody's chart there is the issue, you have to unleash that sort of karma. If you don't unleash that, it is going to come in some other form.
Yeah, you cannot escape that karma. Correct. Good point. Yeah. Thank you. Good point. Yeah.
Prabhuji, that's a very broad question, actually. That one is going to have hard time in marriage, and that can come from any reason, that one might fall sick after getting married, or the partner can fall sick, or sometimes the progeny can be impacted, the santan might have problems. So it basically goes down, and maybe some people keep on staying outside the house itself after marriage. So even the separations, it is like it has various flavors and definitions, where so one has to actually look at all those aspects.
Yeah. All that is also seen. You also know, you're also a student of astrology, right? So all those can be seen as well. Like,
yeah. Prabhuji, I just want to ask people a little bit clear.
Yes, Prabhu, there was a comment, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, that was a comment you made, right? Yeah, I am in agreement with that. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Chakramani,
Yes.
Prabhu, go ahead.
Yeah, so basically, if someone has such kind of karma being seen in his chart, is it that the kind of spouse he selects? I mean, can it mitigate it to some extent, or can it balance it out, or something like that? Is it possible like that?
Yeah, Prahlad bro, you want to take that?
Yes, Prabhuji.
Yeah.
Prabhuji, while seeing the chart actually, normally we superimpose the horoscope of the sort of spouse with that person. Okay. And if
Yeah.
someone's chart shows that if, for example, the Mangal is there in the seventh house, so a person's spouse may be more aggressive in nature. Okay. So it is seen that the other spouse should be of that nature, of his sort of lagna should be that he can sort of balance that act. Okay. If both of them are of the same nature, then it will sort of obviously lead to some kind of conflict, sort of frequent sort of troubles and all. So that is what the horoscope has to be seen in that regard. So nobody's chart can be perfect, but when you match the horoscope, you have to see whether the other person's planets are able to balance it out.
So here my question was basically a person has a chart. Now the spouse matching what we will do based on that. Is it that the person can have, so he has certain karma, but because of the match what is getting from the spouse side, it can be a very horrible experience or it can be a tolerable experience based on his own karma, but also adding to it how the spouse is complementing it. I'm just asking in that sense.
Roji, I have seen few charts actually, like in we have studied, like it's sometimes you see there is a problem in the chart, and it happens that during those specific periods of the dashas, a person sort of behaves or situations will happen that he has to go through that path. Okay, and it is at that time what helps is actually counseling. So if proper counseling is done, then the person may uh, sort of tolerate the situation and go ahead actually. But as I told, as per time, place, and circumstance also it affects. Like if I see a chart of a person sort of staying in sort of US, so there a small amount of conflict can also lead to a divorce. But the same chart, if I sort of predict here in sort of Indian scenario, I will say that there will be only small amount of issue. So it will not lead to a divorce. So your
Okay.
prediction also sort of changes, as per the race, kala and path.
Yeah.
So it is not absolute actually.
Yeah.
If you see something, it is going to be like that only. It
Yeah.
only gives an indication that there are going to be issues, but sort of depending upon the person also how he sort of balances out, and so the reaction may be different. But in some places, I have seen that sometimes the chart is too bad actually, and that does lead to a strong case of like both going away. And in those cases, actually, sometimes we recommend people if they have some very specific dashas going on. We say that you stay away for sort of maybe a year or so, so that there is no issue, and that after 2 years you can again come back and stay together.
Yeah.
So these
Got it.
kind of recommendations are also given actually.
Got
So
it.
those periods are there in the. So it is very sort of dynamic situation.
Yeah.
Very straightforward.
Thank you, Prabhuji, for your
So,
insights.
so one more point, Prabhuji, that sometimes the destiny like itself has planned like for somebody's second marriage, right? When we see the seventh cusp sublords, like I'm talking from the KP perspective, then there could be various ways of looking at this karma, because this question specifically was on the karma itself, right? So either the individual can actually go for a second marriage himself, or the partner can actually go for a second marriage themselves, right? So uh, and very pinpointed answer to that question, yeah, austerity, charity, uh, and one's own behavior, how one tolerates the situation. Definitely, astrology at least says I have a very theoretical understanding of it, and definitely there are different devatas, like for marriage, especially there are some devis who actually bless in a certain way. You know, so there are ways, but then, you know, there is no shortcut. As I think Prabhuji also called out, the karma is going to be faced by one individual, and differing to some extent, or minimizing the effect of the karma to some extent can be done, but definitely one cannot cheat the law of karma.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Prahlad Prabhu, I think it is in what Smithanima Prabhu was saying. That's why, you know, in some places I've heard this tradition that they get the boy or a girl married to some goat or, you know, some animal,
Yeah.
and then, you know, they, or a tree, or they do that, right?
It's called as
For this reason, huh?
karma alignment. Actually, if, for example, it is, if you see some indication, like the marriage is going to be very spoiled thing, like, you know, so they will do a pre-marriage, like they will get married to a sort of tree or something, so that they do that, actually they unleash that karma. Okay.
Yeah, correct.
So that reaction is then gone over the yes.
Yeah.
It can be
That
done.
is considered a solution to what Smithanima
Correct.
Prabhu was saying, you know, when they see the second marriage.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, Hare Bol. Thank you, everyone. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai.
Bhaktivinoda ki jai. Nitai Gaur Premanand. Hare Krishna.